Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to swear in the two new members of the board. Please stand and raise your right hand. I, Stephanie Folds, do solemnly swear
I, Stephanie Folds, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Stand and raise your right hand. I, Elizabeth Decker, do solemnly swear
I, Elizabeth Decker, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Now I would like to take nominations for the election of school board president.
I'd like to nominate Kate Madigan.
I'll second.
All right. Are there any more nominations? All right, we'll close the nominations. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Any abstentions?
Thank you. Oh, it's a new sheet. Thank you, Mr. McDonald's. Okay, we'll move on to nominations for the vice president. Could I have a motion, or a nomination, I'm sorry?
I'd like to nominate Stephanie Kaiser.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Stephanie. Sorry.
Do that.
Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
How far back does that go? 1922. It's been the only one. That's vintage. It's terrible.
Yes.
Kidding, it's fantastic.
All right. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Catherine Madigan, do solemnly swear
I, Catherine Madigan, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board president
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of school board president
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I, Stephanie Kaiser,
I, Stephanie Kaiser,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of School Board Vice
and
President
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of School Board Vice President
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Okay. You all set?
We are all set.
We'll be skipping over this next one. That'll be, Mr. Van Orman has already taken his oath.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so we'll move on to, number 8, the appointments. We're gonna kind of take this a little bit at a time, or what people are comfortable with, because I know that we've had some technical issues and hard copy issues, and so we can do as many or as few as necessary. So if anybody has an idea, we could even just start with a chunk, and maybe if there's any questions.
So we don't have a clerk of the board until we go to the appointments.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the regular business of the meeting, there'll be an appointment.
Okay. And then will we go back to appoint the clerk in our regular meeting?
The appointment in the regular meeting is to appoint the board clerk.
Okay.
I think that one's in there also just afterwards, right?
Yeah. Same with
And
the
the-
information access officer, which is number 11.
Okay.
So is there
A question, on the safety team, in the past or historically, the school board member has been the board president. But we've been talking about, and I know we're not there yet, but when we get to discussing committees, we had talked about some kind of a presence in the safety team there. So I just wondered if it's listed as TBD right now, and if we wanted to also discuss that when we discuss committees.
okay, so, could we have a motion for something, and then we could have,
Yep.
I guess, what does everybody feel?
I'll make a motion for
comfortable
1
with?
through 21.
Okay, could I have a second for that? Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. Okay, so,
Just a question, does
Yep.
that include the district-wide school safety team, or is that like 1 through 21 and like that's on its own?
I'm gonna take it as part of it because it doesn't have a number,
Okay,
if that's okay. And then it
Fine.
moves to 9 on the next page, if that would work for
so all of
everybody.
8, we're doing a motion
All
for
of 8.
all of 8.
I will amend my,
Perfect. Mrs. Kaiser, would you
Yeah.
accept that? Thank you. Okay, so it would be, the motion on the floor is approval for 1 through 21, and then the district-wide school safety team. Any questions other than, what Mrs. Allen just brought up?
Is there a reason why the school resource officer is not there?
Isn't on the safety team?
Or could they be
Yeah,
invited on?
I think we could take a look at, just like Mrs. Allen was saying, with the school board member, we could take a look at possible revisions.
Yeah, I think a question had come up before the meeting about a couple of other people being added to this school-wide, district-wide school safety team. I know we brought this up last year, and I think it just kind of got lost in the mix, so
Okay.
maybe, if we could set maybe a timeline of when we feel like maybe we would have it revised halfway through the year or something like that, like what do we think is reasonable? I just don't want to get a whole other year again down the road and we forgot about it all year long, and, we get to next year and we are like, oh yeah, that's right, last year.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that we could probably approve it as is with additions coming, and maybe we could set the date for September 1st. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Is that not
So
enough?
I was looking to see if that was.
Oh, how do we feel about that?
That seems reasonable.
Okay.
What were the other ones that we had talked about before, do you
I
remember?
had asked about transportation and O&M.
Yes.
I might also give some time to actually review it,
Yep.
you know, in case there's other additions or other people that might be a good resource.
What's a WIN coordinator?
Great question.
What was the
Well,
question?
wellness is now,
Okay.
so it's a staff wellness program.
Lots of acronyms in the school district world.
Any other questions? I can appreciate that we could assign a board member at that point too, if anyone doesn't agree with what Mrs. Allen said. All right. Okay, any other questions? When you're ready.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you. Okay, could I have a motion for 9, the designations?
I'll
Thank you,
make a
Mrs. Bliss. Second by Mrs. Dingman. So this is gonna be 9, 1 through 7. Any questions, clarifications?
I did want to get clarification on the mileage rate. I know that there was a response to the question, but if I feel like that could cause some confusion by the way that it's worded, because right now it might be 0.655 as per the federal rate, but January 1st it's going to change. So I think it should say one or the other, because come January 1st, it's gonna be, well, is it 0.655 or is it whatever the new mileage rate is as of January 1st?
Is this typically updated regularly when the mileage changes, and that's a moot point?
No, usually it says per the IRS rate so that the district doesn't have to go ahead and change it on January 1st.
Right. If it said the IRS rate, that would be acceptable, but last year, we appointed the rate, not the IRS rate. And we never made an update to that in January when it changed.
So,
So technically, people should have only been paid.
The rate that was approved by the board,
Are you
not the newest IRS
asking to
rate.
potentially change the motion to accept with federal changing to IRS?
To the IRS reimbursement rate. I
And
would
get
be-
rid of the
And removing.
specific dollar amount
Yep.
that's in there.
Okay,
We're talking on number 4, correct?
yes, thank you.
Sorry about
Mrs.
that. Yes.
No, thank you. Mrs. Dingman, would you accept the change? Did you
Yes.
second it? Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Just a comment regarding the sub-rate is if you took 97 and divided by 6.5, you're gonna be less than the minimum wage in January. So would we look at having a new rate established in January, or should we have something done now?
Sorry, why are we dividing by 6.5?
Because they're here for 6.5
Gotcha,
hours.
thank you.
When was the last time that rate went up? Do we know?
It's been a few years.
Has it?
I mean, I guess I would say, maybe this is something that we could discuss closer to that end of the year only, that the new board members get a little better understanding on how it works. If that's acceptable, if the majority says no, let's change it now.
Do you find that you have enough subs at those two rates?
I think our experience has been that we don't have enough subs regardless of the rate. I know other districts have changed that number quite a bit, pretty significantly, and did not see a major increase in subbing.
Could we look at approving this today, but look at maybe a little bit higher rate, at least to get in line with minimum wage changes throughout the year by start of school? Like
Maybe that would be a more investigation, like maybe something by the first of the September.
December 1st.
Yeah, September.
So it's, Because it starts January 1st.
Well, I was thinking just for the school year, so we could set it.
She was at school year?
Yeah, for the school year,
Yeah.
set it for the whole year.
Well, that would give Mr. Van Orman some time to research too on what, you know, what our potential is to attract more subs at a higher rate.
So what's the date?
Let's do September 1st if possible.
What's our, September board meeting date?
It was
2 in
this,
August.
she's
Oh,
talking about
it is
to
2 in
reapprove
August?
it. It would be the
wasn't-
day after the
hasn't
first
been
day of school.
established.
Oh,
Potentially at this point, it would be the first week.
okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, when you're ready.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you. Okay, I would take a motion for 10, the authorizations, please. Mrs. Kaiser in a second. Mrs. Folds, I'm gonna put a star next to her name, that's the first time she's done
I was
it.
gonna say, look at her jumping right in.
Okay, questions, clarification on this group? So this is gonna be 1 through 17.
I don't know if we came to a conclusion with some of the questions that came in about number 14 as a whole, but 11 through 14, it just says permission. I just wasn't sure who we're giving permission to. I mean, if it was teachers, if it was, like, what's the assumption there? And is it safe to have it be an assumption?
This changed from last year, so that's why I think there's some questions.
Yeah. Mr. McDonald and I looked at specifically 11 through 14 with respect to that. So I believe number 11 should be granting permission to the treasurer. Number 12 should be granting permission to the superintendent of schools. Number 13 should be granting permission to the superintendent of schools. And number 14 should also be granting permission to the superintendent of schools.
So in number 11, that's why we have an internal claims auditor though, because the board has appointed someone to audit the bills.
So does it have to be one or the other though? Or would it
think
just
we
be
need it
granting
at all.
permission in
I
addition?
don't think it's needed at all.
So you're saying that says it gives the treasurer permission to pay the bills by the due date when the Board of Education meetings do not coincide with such date. So is that during a time where the Board of Education is acting as the claims auditor and not an appointed claims auditor?
I don't believe so.
This was not on there last year.
This was not on there last year.
Okay, so is it more appropriate to remove this and amend it, or approve it as is and then go back and remove it? You're saying yes, the first one, remove 11?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, so what if we were to remove 11, and if there's some sort of clarification where it actually, something else needs to be reestablished, we would come back and make the addition? Would that suffice? Okay, so.
I think the same is fairly true with 14. I think 14 states what we already stated in designations,
Is that new as well, or no?
Mhm.
appointments.
That
It's
was,
a new, go ahead, Bill.
that was extrapolated from other areas from
Okay.
before, but what this does, you approved a resolution at the last meeting to allow the treasurer to do this before the audit. This is sort of a duplicate of that.
But now giving permission to the superintendent.
Yes.
But in number 7, we give the superintendent permission to transfer money up to $20,000
Is the
before a board meeting.
in advance of an audit part? Is that why it's different?
It's to prepare for the audit, yes. That's the difference.
I would feel more comfortable than we wait until the audit then to do that, because as you know, I wasn't silent regarding our purchasing policies last year, and how taking number 7, which states $20,000, we never, the following month, ever received a transfer, probably because they didn't happen. So we weren't following, the process wasn't followed.
Mr. Van Orman, would it make sense, since the audit is next month, just to, to wait on that?
This isn't
Oh,
talking
this is the
about,
audit though from,
this isn't talking about the audit, it's talking about audit of claims.
right,
The audit and the audit of claims are two different things. I just am not sure exactly what I'm approving as well.
it sounds like you're giving carte blanche to not to follow number 7 at all.
Okay, so would it make sense to do the same with 14? We just do a little more investigation before, or does that lock somebody's hands and not be able to do?
No, this one is also new apparently. So it would, we've done without it
Okay,
in the past.
so I would make the suggestion that we amend the motion to remove 11 and 14 at this time. And then that would give Mr. Van Orman and Mr. McDonald some time to look into it if it needs to be added back in, maybe with different language or different information to help us understand. Mrs. Kaiser, would you?
Yeah, so I'll amend, so we'll do a motion for 1 through 10, 12 and 13, and then 15 through 17.
Yes, please.
12 and 13 need to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, she said 12 and 13.
Oh,
With-
because
with
you,
the
so
amendment.
would we be adding in the language by the superintendent? Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
For 12 and 13, Mrs. Folds, would you agree to that? Okay, thank you. So one more time. Number 10, removing 11 and 14 and adding into 12 and 13 by the superintendent of schools. We'll come back to those at some point if necessary. Are there any other questions on that group? You ready?
So just to,
Yes, I'm sorry.
from what I have 1 through 10, 12 through 13, 15 through 17.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Did
Mrs.
you say
Allen?
12 through 15?
12 and 13.
12 and 13,
Okay.
and then 15 through 17. Mrs. Allen? Mrs. Folds?
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Blitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Decker?
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan?
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you. Okay, I don't know if we need a motion for the appointment of committees. I feel like that's not a thing,
It was just
so.
a discussion.
Yeah, so, we'll move on to board committees. So this has been, we've been talking about this for a few months and some different ideas kind of thrown around about maybe potential new committees. With the changeover of, board doc manipulation, it was a little bit more difficult, to add in new items. So I would make the suggestion that, we maybe just work through what's on here today, make the assignments, if we'd like to still remove a couple of them that we had discussed. And we could add on the new ones for the next board meeting, if we'd like to do that. We could also just handwrite them on and do that tonight too. That's completely up to the will of the board. Just as a reminder, we were potentially removing energy and facilities off of there, and transportation. And then our potential new committees were special education representative, community Relations, thank you. And, new board member. I didn't really have a good term for that, if you remember, but
No,
Orientation.
onboarding.
yeah.
We do have a policy on onboarding new members, and Nancy, I didn't have a chance to read what you just gave us, but I wonder if we need a committee for that, or if we just go back to policy and what other tools and resources that might be available to us versus having a named representative or a committee. I think we recognize that we would like something, but what that looks like, maybe we can talk about.
And to add on, we have RCTA and CSCA that are not open this year.
Correct. So we had also, Kim and I had discussed the idea that maybe we also didn't need 3 deep on a committee. So if there was one representative and maybe a backup, or one representative and you found a backup if you needed it, but I know that for some of the negotiations, it can be a little difficult to try to find a time that where 3 board members can all be there at the same time.
I know we talked about, and there's been a lot going on over the past year, obviously. We talked about, especially myself being a new board member last year, and I'm sure these ladies are kind of probably feeling the same, like, what the heck do you do on a policy? Like, we've talked about trying to put together a description of, if you sit on the policy committee, what are you gonna do?
Or really on any of the
Or,
committees.
yeah,
It's
on any of
policy.
them, yeah, so if you're on the audit committee, if you're on the finance committee, what is it that entails? I don't know exactly how we go about doing that, but I feel like it's something we really should.
No, that's a really good point, and Kim had brought that up when, several months ago, and my thought was, I think assigning the committees, and then whoever the chair is of the committee kind of helps do that. You know, if you decide to chair a community relations committee, maybe there's a couple of us on that for that, because that'd be weird if it was just one person meeting by themselves. But you know, try to look at that. We had talked in the past, some of us that are a little bit more savvy with the budget. Is there a way to do some sort of budget slowdown for some of the rest of us, and how that could be presented so that we could understand a little bit better? I'm okay with us writing the descriptions as a group, but I was thinking that if you really have a passion to be part of the policy committee, maybe that group could kind of write its own book. Sorry. Did she just do that? Shut the camera off, Eric. Jolene's laughing at me.
Passion for the policy committee.
Listen, it's a lot of policies. You gotta have a
There's
passion.
lot of policies.
I don't know how everybody feels about that, but that would also give some opportunity for some leadership within the groups, and then also it would give us an opportunity to come back and report back, because in my experience, we don't until there's an issue with something, and that's when we hear from the committees. Any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Okay. Anybody against removing transportation and energy and facilities?
I personally kind of feel like we should keep transportation. I think there's still some kinks that need to be worked out. And probably would be good to have some people on a committee for that.
So the only reason that one made the list is because we were never involved. It was always an internal, kind of.
And also, we now have people that are running transportation rather than it being the superintendent, which it was at the beginning of last year.
And it's not to say that if there's any concerns, you certainly bring them up.
I just know that there have been lots of concerns over transportation. I
Mhm.
mean, like the kids right now, some of them are over an hour to school for the summer program and an hour back.
Yeah,
Hour
the,
and 10 or 15 minutes, so.
so I think what you're bringing up is a good point. We did add in transportation, to be part of the admin reports so that we could kind of understand what's going on. And I would only say, because I'm not sure it would be, in my opinion, enough to be a regular committee, that might also be something that the community relations part is, because then you can help communicate that this is one of the things that we have going on right now that needs some resolution. But I'm not against leaving it. if we wanna leave it.
It sounds like she might wanna chair it.
I think it kind of goes back to
That's funny.
understanding what the committees do. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a transportation committee.
Okay.
But if, like, what is the role of us having a committee for it? Do we, if there's a meeting if the transportation department's having a meeting, maybe whoever the chair is for that committee goes and sits in just as somebody who observes and then can report back to the board as a group and say, this is what I saw happening at the bus garage, and some good things, or like that's, again, I don't really understand the purpose of our
Well,
committees.
the other thing is that we could put someone assigned to that, write the purpose of it, and see if it's actually necessary. If you write that you're gonna sit in on transportation meetings and they happen twice a year that you'd really be involved, well then maybe that's kind of a miscellaneous committee that we don't really need. Or if we're getting information from other avenues and this is just redundant, then we just eliminate the committee. Does that, no?
No, I think
I mean, I think they could all be evolving, to be honest. I mean,
if you have somebody that wants to step in and work the committee.
okay, so we'll leave transportation.
Are we willing to have the board?
Yes.
So
Tell
I
me.
was just gonna say, I think there's something to what you were saying about the community relations kind of having a piece of that. My only thought is, to the point that the superintendent really was more involved in the past, perhaps there was a need for a board member to be in the mix, but now that we have someone kind of running it. So that's just I'm thinking, because I agree with what Elizabeth was saying, in terms of the feedback that we've heard, but I do think that could kind of fall on that realm of community relations myself. But, I mean, I am not opposed to keeping transportation if folks feel strongly, but it may just be for kind of streamlining things that are pulling folks together.
I think one of the main reasons why we wanted to eliminate it is because that department did go through its own reorganization. So we kind of stepped back and took a look and said, well, why do we even have this committee combined with the reorganization at the bus garage? We felt like it wasn't necessary.
Okay, so are we okay with getting rid of energy and facilities?
Yep.
I think that one can go.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Nancy.
I would love to be on the finance and budget committee, if you don't mind.
No.
If you do that though, you also have to be on the transportation committee then?
No,
I'm just
Elizabeth
kidding.
is going to be on the transportation committee.
All right, well, where do we sit with transportation? Are we keeping it? Are we maybe adding it later? Quick straw poll, how many to keep?
I'll be on it if that helps in the decision.
I will
She
say
wants
if Elizabeth wants to be on it, keep it.
Okay, that's enough to keep it. All right. Okay, let's just go down really quick because I feel like Mrs. Zingman might only take one. We don't want that to happen. So,
I'm already on the policy.
all right. So, let's start with policy. So, Mrs. Allen, are you interested in continuing to chair?
Please.
Okay, Mrs. Dingman, would you stay?
I can't wait to stay.
Okay, awesome.
We've just started.
That's right. We need one more for policy.
Do we, or what do we?
I thought we were only going
Are we
2
doing?
deep.
Oh, I thought that. I'm sorry. I would say policy. I would assume maybe one more because that's quite. We're gonna do a full review this year, and that's quite a lot to put on 2 people. But I'm also not volunteering, so.
I'll do it.
Okay, Mrs. Decker, thank you. The audit is all of us, and it's typically the board president chair, so we'll move on. Finance and budget. So, Mrs. Dingman, you'd like to be on there now?
Is she gonna share this?
And I would share it every board meeting. if you'd
But
like.
are you gonna
She
share
said
this?
share.
I would share it. I'll even share it too if you'd like me to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to
Mrs.
take that away
Bliss,
from
would you-
anybody else.
I will stay as the other.
I think that that's a fantastic idea, and I'm expecting a budget for dummies as soon as possible, so. Okay, so transportation, would you be okay with Mrs. Decker taking over chairing that?
Mhm.
Mrs. Kaiser, would you stay on?
I can stay or Kim can stay, whatever she wants to do.
Kim?
It's up to you if you, It doesn't matter to me either way, so.
I'll
you
sit on it if either of you don't,
Are indifferent?
yeah,
Okay, then we'll change to Jolene.
since the two of us were the ones with our hands raised.
Okay, so I would suggest that we at least name a chair for the RCTA and the CSEA, just for some reason that someone's assigned if necessary. Take one?
Sure.
Okay. So we'll put Dingman on RCTA, anybody for CSEA?
I'll do it.
Bliss is working out fantastic. Okay, I will stay on the RCA if that's okay.
I'll stay on as well.
Okay. BOCES rep?
Are we gonna talk about the alternates on the negotiations, cause
So I would say that, unless volunteering to be on it, it would be, you need to find an alternate if you can't make the meeting, if that would be okay.
so we're just gonna scratch the alternate.
We're gonna scratch the
We're just gonna go
extras.
with a
Yep, and
chair
if,
for each.
you know,
and
if you were going to CSEA and you could make them all, but you couldn't make one, that you would find someone that it would work for their schedule, if that's okay.
Fine with that. Mhm.
Could
I'd be
that,
interested, well, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say BOCES, but.
Okay.
for the negotiations committee, if we're only keeping one chair, could those chairs, email everyone simultaneously to see who's available? Would that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that might work for any alternate person if, I mean, there's some of them that aren't gonna work. If you're on the policy committee, you're gonna work around the three of you because you're working on it every time. But if you can't make a transportation meeting that exists, you know, if Jolene can't make it too, then email the rest of the board, find somebody that can do it. Does that sound okay? Okay. So folds for the BOCES rep? Okay, we actually do need an alternate for this, so anybody interested?
I can do it.
Okay. I'll stay on the rules folds because I'm not really on anything. So, Jolene, are you interested in staying the alternate?
I think there's a lot that we could do with that.
Yeah, I do too, and I think that one also requires a rep and an alternate though, so would you be okay with? Great,
And I would definitely love to see us get together and
good idea.
do something with that.
Community center board was, last year was held by Mr. Dates, so,
I would do community center. I don't know if anybody would have a problem with that due to conflict of interest, with me. So,
maybe as an alternate.
I would do the community.
Would like to stay, I want to chair that if I can.
Okay, so Mrs. Allen would move as the rep. And the alternates would be Kaiser and Folds.
So are we thinking that we would, so we get community center updates from Mr. Welcher currently?
We do.
Or, okay. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
do you wanna stay on that, Jolene, or?
No, I'm good. You guys can have it.
Okay,
I've got plenty.
so who's the first alternate?
I can be if there's a.
Okay.
I think that's one where, I don't know if it needs to, or if we follow suit with the other committees where.
Same like if the alternate couldn't go also, then they just email everyone.
That's totally fine. I didn't, they're so much more structured. I didn't know
Mhm.
how often you used alternates for, I mean, I know you went a
Yep.
lot, so,
Yep, yeah, it's a once a month meeting, so if Brad was not able to attend, then I just went.
okay,
So
so,
could we, if there's monthly meetings, because I don't remember ever really getting updates from
Right.
our community center committee.
Right,
As a
just like
board.
anything else, right? We're,
Yeah.
so I
Yep.
think going forward, we're gonna just all bring stuff to update at this point.
let's talk about that in one more second when we do this last one. Nisba, do you wanna say the same? Anybody interested?
I wonder if it makes sense for me to be the alternate at this point.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, as far as the groups as a whole. I would suggest that, maybe if it's not the next meeting, but by the following meeting, if you're chairing a committee, that you're talking to your group and making some sort of goal setting. What is gonna be our plan? You know, if Jolene and I have an idea for rural schools and how we wanna participate in that in our area, that we bring that back to the rest of the group to discuss. And for example, if it's the community center board, that there will be a 1 month report out in whatever fashion works best, so that we're actually using these committees for what they're meant to be. Any thoughts on that?
So you're saying the second, not the next one. Do we have 2 in July?
No, August 2nd.
So like the end of August?
I would hypothetically before school started, where things get, does that feel like enough time?
Are you asking for written updates or just come to the board meeting prepared to update and go through verbally?
Well, so it's really at the will of the board, but I would say if we were gonna wait until the end of August, maybe if there was some sort of written update for the rest of, okay, this is what the goal is for transportation. Jolene and I have met. We're hoping to report out once a quarter as far as where we are. How often do you see something coming out of it? Something like the community center board would be a little bit more often, but let's say the NISBA rep would be less often. Does that make sense?
Maybe have those descriptions.
The budget committee should talk every single time we meet.
I think I will.
What's that, Jolene? I'm sorry.
And have those descriptions together?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I feel like that's a decent amount of time if that works. So leave that responsibility to the chair of each committee to come back with.
And someone's gonna send out an update of
Yep.
all these.
I would say we'll get it updated.
And then I would just ask, in order to be included in the packet, that we give a 1 week notice prior to that board meeting at the end of August. Is that all right?
Are we gonna revisit the potential new committee?
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the onboarding of new board members as a potential committee.
I would love to help out with that.
So you're in favor of forming a committee?
I don't know, I think it's more of a summer, I would think, after election, throughout the summer.
Okay. So maybe more of a mentorship? What do we think?
I like that.
Somebody's shaking her head a lot.
I definitely think it'd be helpful. I think it's overwhelming, the amount of information that comes at, especially at your first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't really have like any prior training or anything other than, the board training. I think a mentorship type committee is a really good idea.
Okay. What does everybody else think?
I think a checklist of things you have to do before your first meeting, and maybe a list of contacts, Nancy, people who you would go with certain questions.
So again, we've got a policy that outlines in bullet form what the board and its staff will assist each new member elect to understand the board's functions, policies, and procedures before he or she takes office by, and then it lists what the criteria is that ultimately it sounds like we're all responsible for. In the past, or historically, it's been the board president who has made contact and onboarded, if you will, a new member. So do we need a committee to do what we already have a policy for and what we already sort of have a procedure in place for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily. I mean,
Just the mentorship.
when I first started, you were given a mentor as a veteran board member, and that was just another go-to opportunity if you needed help. So are we in favor of going back to that? Signing a mentor for the summer to kind of help oversee this policy and make sure it's actually getting done?
Right.
I think so.
I'd be happy to be anybody's mentor.
And that would be the responsibility of the board president at that point?
To be the mentor?
Or to assign the mentor.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it as a group.
Okay.
I think that Nancy is interested. Is anyone else interested in being a mentor to a new board member? FYI, we could use two.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Dingman, how about we put you with Mrs. Decker, because you're on this side, Mrs. Allen with Mrs. Foltz. Okay, so we'll eliminate that as a possibility of a committee. Okay, community relations. Thoughts
So I
on-
guess what is that going to entail?
Well, I think the reason that we came up, and this title doesn't necessarily need to be exact, but we had a lot of little comments and conversations, kind of what Elizabeth had just brought up about these are concerns. Are we making sure that we're, delivering back information and we're, being an ear for the public? I don't know, maybe the committee's formed and then it actually doesn't really do anything. I think it's pretty open. Maybe it's too open to actually assign as a committee.
I think in the recent past, we had talked about Operation Graduation also kind of falling in there, or maybe recognition. So there are just some
Oh yeah, the recognition, that was
ideas
a
that
big,
have
yep.
been tossed around, and we kind of put them in this bucket, right?
So yeah, I think that we have to, I love the recognition piece of it, but then the listening ear piece of it, like how would we go about that? Like would we have, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so what if we set this one aside for right now? Let's give it some more thought and possibly come back to a better umbrella for this group. Because I think that the idea was to do some positive things. Maybe we need some more information before we can kind of figure out what's gonna fall underneath that. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, special education, Mrs. Bliss, I believe that this was an idea from you originally.
It was something that was kind of brought up to me from the special education department, that it might be a good idea to have the board. I guess I don't have enough of, I haven't thought enough about it to be able to say.
So maybe
okay,
that
this
needs a
is
little
what-
more time too?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, let's come back to those two then. We'll give it some thought. We know that we're gonna be reporting out again at the end of August. So that would give us some time, and maybe the new board members, if you have some ideas, you could push those through your mentors and then they could report back. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I would take a motion for E12, which on my sheet is attachments.
It's the calendar. We have to discuss.
I would say, yeah, we need to.
It looks like 3, thank you, Mrs. Allen, and a second. Thank you, Mrs. Decker.
What
Okay.
happened to the original?
So, the original was actually established by Mrs. Hoisington to avoid another school calendar by just putting one date in every month. That decision, I don't think, was a group decision, and so then, when Mr. Van Orman was taking over the role, there was a conversation of adding back in 2 meetings a month, because that's what he thought would be most effective. Then when we came up with this list against the school calendar that he has access to, and also, vacations and things like that, we moved the first meeting, not the first night of the school, the start of school, we moved it to a Thursday just so that you could avoid it. We thought maybe starting with this many meetings also would give us an opportunity to possibly put in budget meetings as an extra time without having to try to establish a date that would work for everybody. And then also they could be eliminated if necessary, if there was no business to be done at that time. And I know that we have a couple of corrections to the budget hearing, right?
Budget hearing, budget vote date.
Okay.
The whole bottom.
Yeah, the bottom.
So,
So are we gonna discuss, because I know we had talked about, before waiting on the calendar until the new board members were here,
yep,
that way we could go through it.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say I won't be here August 2nd. So we can
Okay.
change it, or I won't be here.
just before we keep going, can you give us the corrected dates for the 4 items at the bottom so we can just amend the resolution or the motion?
Okay, budget hearing could either be May 7th or May 8th. We already have a regular board meeting scheduled for the 8th. So we could combine those two if it was the will of the board, or we could have it the day prior to the board meeting.
If I'm remembering correctly, the budget hearing we had this year lasted about 10,
If that.
15,
So
10
it would be
minutes.
great if it could be
If it could be
combined.
I would agree with that. I would also take
Could we
that.
have the budget hearing and the board meeting on the 7th, May 7th?
As opposed to May 8th?
Yep.
I could do either.
Yeah.
So the reason why we keep it,
Oh, because actually the 8th is the Wednesday. And you want to do it the Tuesday instead?
I would like to, I will not be here on the 8th if it's still the 8th.
I'm fine with the 7th.
I mean, I can do the 7th if that's,
is the budget vote staying the same?
No.
Okay, well, can we talk about that for a quick minute and go back to the other?
So the budget vote would be May 21st. It's the third Tuesday in the month,
Historically, is it the 3rd? Is that what?
legally.
Legally, okay. So Tuesday, May 21st.
so that would keep our meetings in May both on Tuesdays.
Well, we've got a May 22nd meeting, which is a Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we
That's
don't
pretty
have a meeting
traditional.
for the vote.
We would have
Yeah,
a
we're
meeting
We're not
Yeah.
meeting
after.
on the budget anyways.
You don't have to.
What are the other two?
Graduation is June 28th.
Okay.
And based on the addition of the June 26th regular meeting, I would recommend the reorganization meeting on July 10th.
Okay.
That's exactly the recommendation I was gonna make as well, push it out a week.
I won't be here on the 10th.
I guess it could be any time.
It's within the first 15 days.
Correct.
It could even be on the 1st.
Okay, could we do everything on May 7th? Let's start with that.
Regular meeting, budget hearing.
Correct. Could we make that adjustment? All right. Okay.
Before we, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure we have the meetings, all the meetings at 7 o'clock. And we're good with keeping that.
That was what we had talked about when this schedule originally came out when Missy made it. So I'm assuming, unless there's been a change to anybody's schedule, obviously Mrs. Decker and Mrs. Folds, you're looking at this for the first time, but is 7 acceptable for you?
I could do earlier too, it doesn't matter, but yes, I could do something.
Okay.
I also could do earlier.
I
if you
also
wanted
could
to.
do earlier.
That would probably be my preference. I
As
think
long
we
as
used
they
to be
don't
at 6
coincide with my
o'clock.
board meetings, then I can go earlier. But, yeah.
I would be nervous to do that without checking with other people's commitments on those evenings in case then we're just changing them back. So could we possibly commit to 7 at this point, and then some of us that work for other districts, if they wanted to check, and we could all, in case you,
For districts.
like if you just said unless it
Oh, I already
coincides.
know when our board meetings are.
So do you have any that coincide?
The 10th of January, the 10th of April.
Okay, so how much earlier is a consideration? If we're
What time
considering,
would you be able to be here, Nancy?
Oh, for those two?
no, for in general.
I mean, if those two are your conflicts, if those meet,
If you'd
do
like to
those
say
meet-
4:30, I can be here at 4:30. Last year I made it here every time at 7 o'clock.
On your, so the days that don't have overlap,
There's 2 right now.
how early are we thinking? If we actually were to change it to
Yeah, are
earlier?
we talking like 6:30, 6? Like, how much
Yeah,
of a
what are we
change
talking about?
My thought was 6.
I can do 6, I can do 5:30.
No?
I'm not in favor of that.
Okay,
The 6:30 or none?
saying it's 7.
I would say 6:30 would be the earliest I would be willing to be okay with.
I'm gonna have trouble before 6 on some evenings, I mean. But if I'm the only one, then I'll have to make the adjustment.
And I'm okay with 6:30. I don't.
We're in favor of pushing it up a half hour?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. I think this board meeting has jumped back and forth between 6:30 and 7 o'clock, like, a bunch of times.
Which is what made me think of it in the fact that this one was at 5:30.
Yeah.
Going where?
Okay, other conflicts on the calendar?
I have a conflict with the 23rd of August.
Okay,
I have a conflict with August 2nd and April 24th.
okay. Anybody else?
January 10th, April 10th.
Okay,
And just, if one of those days are gonna be the budget adoption, it needs to be before the 24th.
okay,
That's law, not opinion.
okay. Any other conflicts? Okay, so I would say what I have is 5 meetings with 1 board member that can't make each one of them, so I would say we would adopt as is and adjust if necessary. Okay. Any questions? I think we're gonna put it the 10th and then we'll make the change if we need to. Other questions? I think it might be adjusted anyway. Okay, Mr. McDonald, when you're ready.
Can I just,
Oh, I'm sorry, did you want?
I have May 7th instead of May 8th for the board meeting.
Yes,
I have May 7th for the budget hearing.
yes,
I have May 21st for the budget vote.
yes.
I have graduation on June 28th, and
Yes.
then the next reorganizational meeting on July 10th of 2024.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Decker?
Yep.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Folds?
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss?
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. Whew, okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn that one. Mrs. Kaiser and Mrs. Bliss. Okay, thanks. Don't leave.
We're good.
Have to do the pledge again? Have to do the pledge twice? Okay. Oh,
I don't know.
Mr. Zimmerman's calling for a second pledge. Okay, all right, we're gonna stand for the pledge again. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So you know, he all said it never hurts to do extra pledges, so just keep that in mind.
It's hard to stand up.
Yeah, get the blood flowing. Look at all these no thank yous. Are you speaking? No thank you. Okay, I would take a motion for C, the minutes of June 7th and the special meeting of June 21st. Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. And a second. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Bliss, sorry. Any questions, corrections on these? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh. Thank you, Mrs. Decker. Okay, D, the financial reports. We have one internal claims auditor report. Could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. Second, Mrs. Folds. Any questions on this? All in favor?
Actually, I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Okay,
Sorry,
no problem.
just need a minute to turn it.
Take your time.
What does this report in the problem identified column, what does it mean when it says that there was no PO issued until after? Like, how is that an issue?
Confirming PO. Purchase order is designed to give the person permission to make the
Gotcha.
purchase. So if they make the purchase and then the PO is created, then they technically did not have permission.
Gotcha, thank you.
They're illegal for schools.
I was gonna say, POs in my world are not, are not,
You can't have a
not used that
confirming
way.
PO.
that it means you're
Thank you.
technically not following your purchasing
Procedures.
procedures.
Other questions? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, moving on. I would take, and I would say this, that if there's questions by either of the new board members and you wanna break this out, we can totally do that. But I would take, a motion for the consent agenda. Mrs. Dingman,
I'd like to amend it though, I would like to remove number 4, have a separate vote.
okay. This is a little crazy.
Number 4 is.
Number 4.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Mrs. Kaiser. Okay, so I would take the,
Also remove.
I will take the consent agenda with the exclusion of number 4 appointment. Mrs. Folds, would you
Yes.
second that? Okay. Any questions on this group?
I had asked a question regarding the student getting fingerprinted. Why are we fingerprinting students?
We're not required to.
Oh, I know we're not required to, but are we having the grant pay for fingerprints?
No,
Are they being fingerprinted? Is it a
No, they're
mistake?
not.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's gonna be removed?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that just the one student, number 17?
Number 4,
Number 3, number 4,
Oh, 3, 4.
number 2 already has fingerprint clearance.
It's like
Uh,
17.
Number 12 requires fingerprint clearance.
Mhm.
Number 1 and number 17 are the 2 in question. They are not,
we are required to, if they're not our students.
they're not our students.
We're required to.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes, please, with the exception of number 32, why are 21, 22, 26, and 27 highlighted? Assuming that those pieces of information changed.
Yes.
So I apologize if the details were given to us and I just overlooked it, but why,
Yeah, what changed about
what
them?
changed with 21, 22, 26, 27?
What's 32?
26 and 27, I think, came out
Oh, that's
after
not printed. Okay.
the original agenda was sent out, so that's just a revision relative back to the reorg meeting with the board clerk and the information access officer.
Okay.
Which was the other one, 32?
Nope, excluding 32.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
No, that's okay.
21 and 22.
Oh,
Mr. Harris.
I believe that represents there are 2 stipends for the AV coordinator. There's an elementary version and then there's a middle high school version.
Okay.
I believe there's only been 1 recommendation sent down to the district office at this time, which reflects the elementary, is that what it says? Elementary AV coordinator only.
I do have one more question, but it's with regard to the coach appointments. So again, are those included in 1 through 32 because they don't have line items
Yep.
following them?
Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
There was no mentioning of girls modified soccer, so I was just curious if there's no, like, why do we not have a coach for that? And are we planning to have a team for that?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
I would expect that we would still
I
have a
was
team.
wondering if, with where it says girls JV soccer, if that was just a misprint.
I was wondering
He
the
is
same.
doing modified. I wasn't sure.
Maybe that's something that we could get back to it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And are we feeling we're gonna have enough girls for a varsity JV and modified soccer program?
It's my understanding we have to have a modified and a varsity, right?
But the JV is optional?
JV is
JV is
optional if you can't fill a team, but there
Which
has
is-
to be a modified.
Which is why I was wondering why we were, we're
That's why I
appointing
was wondering
JV
if
and
it
not
was-
modified.
So maybe it's a typo.
That's why I thought maybe it was a misprint or typo.
So, I would say if everybody's comfortable still voting and we could make the adjustment if necessary, I'm gonna cross my fingers that we've got enough kids that are playing, that we actually need all these coaches. And then we could come back maybe next Friday update or something, you could let us know where we stand for fall
The only other
sports.
thing that I actually just thought of was, because I see this infamous Schedule B noted here, we talked quite a bit last year about that being revised, and I remember in the RCTA negotiations, there was conversation about, I thought the union was going to put something together to revise that schedule. Again, here we are a year later, it hasn't happened. There's been a lot going on, so is that something we're really going to look at?
We're in negotiations with them.
Beautiful.
Is a board member a part of that committee since it's RCTA?
They have presented a proposal to the district.
I believe that the last chair for that negotiations is no longer on the board, so it would roll over to whoever we just.
Mrs. Dingman.
Great question, Mrs.
So
Dingman.
excited.
Okay, so we'll look for an update on that, and if everybody's comfortable, we'll vote as is on these.
Okay.
I'm assuming that a JV and a modified, salary for this would be a different stipend probably. Do we wanna vote on it not knowing which stipend we would be giving?
So we would adjust it versus what the title would be. So if we gave them $4,000 and then it changed, the title would change and the stipend would change. But that's a good question.
It would come through as a revision.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we just have enough for 3 teams.
Keep it positive. You never know. Any other questions on this group? When you're ready, sir.
Okay, for 1 through 3, 5 through 32, including the coach appointments. Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, so it's a new year, and I'm not gonna screw this up, so hold your applause, Mrs. Johnson. I'm gonna do that, but I've screwed it up every single meeting before that, so I'm not doing that anymore. So we'd like to congratulate Mrs. Johnson. Welcome to the team. Mrs. Smith, welcome back. Mr. Carter,
Yes.
welcome to the team. And I think that's everybody in the room. Joe, it's always good to see you. Congratulations. Thank you for coming today. She's not here.
Congratulations to her as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is she here and I missed her? Because that, I'm starting off on a bad note, but, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Yes, we'll go back and vote on the infamous Mrs. Kaiser, or Miss Kaiser. Okay, so I will, take a motion for, F14 of the consent agenda, please, Mrs. Bliss, and a second by Mrs. Dingman. Any questions on the reliability of this employee before we move forward? Don't all vote no at once whenever you're ready, sir.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Abstain.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 6-0-1.
thank you, sir. Okay, moving on, G. Can I have a motion, please, for the CSE and CPSC recommendations?
Did we?
Oh, sorry, I
we did
skipped
the
over.
resignations.
F2.
This is typically how it works, because I know you haven't seen these yet, so.
I'd like to make a motion for
Thank you.
F2.
Okay. Can I have a second, please? Mrs. Kaiser. So Mrs. Dingman with a motion and a Kaiser second. Questions on this?
Is that just for?
Just for F2, I apologize.
For all of them.
For all resignations.
1 through
Right.
Do we have any community questions?
Yep, yeah, please.
Our plan, or what the plan might be to replace this, extra classroom treasurer?
The student accounts.
The
We need to
student
have somebody
accounts,
appointed,
yes.
correct?
Yeah, it'll be our normal process, and we'll find
Okay.
somebody, we'll bring them. I mean, we have a little bit of time since there's
Yeah.
no student accounts activity right now, so.
With your audit, well, she's leaving, okay, August 30th, that's not right away. Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other questions? I'm ready.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you. Okay, on to G, CSE, CPSE recommendations. Could I have a motion, please? Mrs. Decker, and a second by Mrs. Bliss. Questions? Clarification? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. For new business, does anyone want to give me a motion for something all, Mrs. Dingman?
I'll make a motion for H1 through 4.
1 through 4.
That's what I have.
Okay. Can I have a second for that? No?
No,
Okay.
we need to pull out 4. Do that one separately.
Mrs. Allen is asking to separate the policy group. Would you carry the motion
I'll-
for 1 through 3?
I'll make that amendment.
Thank you. And a second by Mrs. Folds. Okay, questions on this group? I hope that you all reviewed the individual library books.
I actually did.
I do have a question on number 1. This is in, the terms and conditions are in here because it just never existed prior? Okay.
That's correct.
That's what I thought, thank you.
I know that we talked about it before in regards to the library, and, we spent some time over there for executive sessions before, and we
Mhm.
kind of noticed that the library shelves were looking a little light. And here we are getting rid of a lot of library books. Where are we at with refilling our library shelves?
We've kind of transformed that space. We've taken out some of the shelving, and it's through our furniture process is reconfigured some of it, so it looks quite a bit different than maybe the last time you might have viewed it. I know the building principals are constantly, as appropriate, reviewing and approving requisition requests to purchase new books in the
Are
library.
we seeing a shift in the usage of the library for books?
Yeah, it really becomes more of a media center than it does a library.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe we'll take a trip down there sometime and see what it looks like.
Sounds like
Field trip, yeah, that's my brain. Any other questions on H 1 through 3? When you're ready, sir.
Wait, 1 second.
Okay.
Can refresh my memory. The administrative contract, was that a 1-year rollover?
This is just to add the Juneteenth.
Okay, so we're adding Juneteenth to a contract that's not in effect anymore?
It was approved last month.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So it's been 2 years of a 1-year rollover, which is probably what you're thinking,
Okay.
so it's just another rollover. Other questions? Really don't want any.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you. I take a motion for H4, the second reading for that list of policies there.
I would like to motion, before we take that motion, to pull 7552 and 8320 for further review of the policy committee. So we'll be excluding those two,
What two were they?
7552, 8320.
Okay, so is your motion to approve the other or to?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is for a second reading and approval of 15, 10, 32, 20, 56, 30, 61, 60, 74, 20, 75, 40, and 84, 50. Could I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Mrs. Decker. Okay, questions for that group of policies? when you're ready, sir.
I apologize.
We're even now.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Folds,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes,
Passes 7-0.
thank you, sir. I'll take a motion for the other two policies or something.
No, they're just tabled.
I'm just asking for someone to say that they're asking to table. She didn't do that in the last
Oh, I
motion.
apologize.
No, that's okay.
Is that?
I thought that's what I was doing, but.
I only took the one, that's why I asked, I just
Gotcha.
wanted to ask first, so I have a motion to table 7552 and 8320 in a second by Mrs. Bliss. Yes? Is-
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
okay.
yep,
Okay,
sorry.
perfect. We'll move those on to the next meeting to be reviewed by the policy committee. Thank you. Mr. Van Orman.
Thank you. Thank you. You should have attached the high school, high honor roll, and honor roll reports for the middle and high school. That's standard,
you.
standard recognition for us. We have the administrative reports.
Is there any further clarification needed for those? I think everybody had a chance to review. Okay.
For our honor rolls,
Mhm.
do you know like where we're at with like percentage of students, or how many are regularly on these lists, or if maybe it's something, it would just be interesting to know overall how our students are performing.
Like compared to other
Well-
honor rolls or?
Well, just our student population, how many of our students are performing at the honor roll level from quarter to quarter? How many are staying at that level year over year, like how we're looking, just kind of some analysis on how, I mean, I can look at this list and I'm so proud of all these students. But as a whole, I'm just
Was
wondering.
it twice as much last time, or did they
Right,
stay on there? That's a good point.
Right. You know, is it, do we see that it's dropping off by the time we get to the end of the year? Kids are getting tired out. It's better in the middle of the year.
Be interesting to know at some point.
Yeah, it'd be easy to compile. We can certainly get that information.
Good idea, Jolene. Any other clarifications? Did you have anything else to report?
I don't think so.
Okay, great.
I did wanna say.
Oh, never mind.
So sorry. The talkative one over here. I did wanna say, congratulations to Mrs. Devaney for the new grant that you mentioned. Didn't you mention that you got a new grant in here?
Primary project, yes.
Yes, so congratulations on that.
Congratulations.
I'm excited to see what we can do with that.
I'm gonna need a bit more of a reminder for that if you expect me to remember that one too. Just kidding.
And at what month will, or which meeting are we gonna discuss board goals?
That's on our list.
All right.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I would take a motion to move into executive for a particular personnel matter, please. Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser, and a second by Mrs. Bliss. Thank you very much. We have to do what?